Russia will do everything it possibly can to ensure the safety of Indian citizens in those areas of intense combat actions and their evacuation, and to do a proper investigation of this unfortunate accident. I want to draw your attention and point out again very clearly. It should be clear to you and the Indian public that Russia does not fight the Ukrainian people. Russia does not target civilian buildings and infrastructure. Russia does not use prohibited weapons. The only instance so far, the downing of the communication tower in Kiev yesterday, for that, the Russian forces issued a specific warning in advance so as to avoid civilian casualties. This is the pattern we follow. It's very easy to frame Russia without any evidence, since we have the upper hand on the ground, and blame it for all the sins. But the truth is that it is the Ukrainian units manned by notorious Russia haters and ultra-nationalists which put up feverish and indiscriminate resistance. You may not know, I suspect, credible CNN reporters find it unnecessary to deliver to the public that the Ukrainian authorities opened up prisons and let out criminals and convicted murderers en masse and armed them with weapons that the West so generously provide. They wouldn't have needed to do that had there been mass volunteering of citizens, haven't they? It is easy to accuse Russia of waging a war if you forget or don't know that the war in Ukraine started 8 years back. Is the general public aware of massive shellings of residential areas in Donbass over these years by the Ukrainian forces? Have people heard of mass graves of civilians there and the Alley of Angels, the mass grave of children murdered by Russia haters? Probably not, because CNN does not report about it. It's only now, when Russia said enough is enough and stepped in to end the war, after expiring all peaceful means and efforts to implement Minsk agreements, that everyone cries foul and dub us aggressors. And who says that and orchestrates that in the first place? The US, the real aggressor of all times and places. It's a tragedy for us and for Ukrainians. Our heart bleeds from what is happening. It is not our choice. Our choice is the peaceful solution. But this is all not about democracy and freedom and territorial integrity. Not at all. We do not intend to impose ourselves on Ukraine. We're happy with the Ukrainian choices. We just want that these choices, like the choices of the rest of Europe, take into account our choices, as was agreed by all at OSCE, that security of one cannot be reached at the expense of the security of the others. I'm convinced that we would have agreed on compromise had the US not prevented it. But it does, because their choice is global dominance under the guise of democracy, freedom, and the so-called rules-based international order. The very rules that the US formulate at the pretense of consulting allies and partners. Those who fall out of line, out of US line, cease to be partners and become foes. It's like black and white. There is no in between, no shades of gray. It's a dictatorship in velvet gloves. I'm of the opinion that India sees that very clearly. That's why its position being so unbiased and not at all because it is dependent on Russian arms. I would be happy to answer your questions.